My name is Allie Williams, and I'm the Executive Director of the Corporate Responsibility Officers Association. I'll introduce the Big Idea Lightning Panel in just a moment, but first I'd like to share with you a little bit about the CROA and what we do. The association promotes the practice and profession of corporate responsibility in service of good business. We educate and engage leaders at all levels to use corporate responsibility to reduce risk, improve operational efficiency, save money, attract talent, and encourage innovation. The 4 core values of the association are professional development, a place to go and learn, provide tools for benchmarking, and define the focus on the industry. Networking, we're doing that now, an opportunity to meet others with similar issues, concerns, and opportunities. A communications channel, the opportunity to tell your story, to make the world aware of what's working in your company, and to be the voice of the customer, an in-depth process of capturing the customers, our members' needs, wants, and other opportunities. We are becoming a model for other associations, an organization others will aspire to be. I invite you to come work with us, grow with us, and help us advance our mission. Please stop by the Capitol Room on the 2nd floor, the hospitality suite for the CROA, to pick up information, and we'd love to have you join us as members. Now, on to the Big Idea Lightning Round. It's a rapid-fire series of presentations on big ideas that will change our world. We'll spend just 10 minutes with each of our 4 gentlemen presenting their ideas. First, please help me welcome Neil Giacobbi, Public Affairs Director for AT&T New York City. Neil will tell us about how AT&T installed solar-powered panels, a charging station, in parks, pedestrian plazas, and on seaside boardwalks throughout New York City. Neil?
It's a real privilege to be here today, and I just want to thank the conference organizers for inviting me. AT&T Street Charge was introduced in New York City across the 5 boroughs just this year in June. And I'm going to tell a little story about its inception and the inspiration for this project and the impact it's had on our company. So Street Charge, and there it is solar powered. It can be placed anywhere. It doesn't require any infrastructure hookup. It's free to anyone with a mobile device. And it was available, like I said, all throughout the 5 boroughs as part of a collaboration with the New York City Parks Department to find locations for our mobile chargers. We already offer free Wi-Fi to anybody with a phone in 25 parks. So we have a terrific partnership with the city, and this was a very easy project to springboard from. Street Charge. So there it is. It's a very beautiful charging unit. It looks good. It's about 11.5 feet tall. It weighs about 1,200 pounds. And inside that skinny stem right there are several batteries that are powered by the solar panels up on top. And these are typical monocrystalline panels, and the batteries inside will completely recharge from a 0 level to full at 100% in about 3 hours of direct sunlight. There's these little green LEDs at the tips of the solar panels that will show you that it's operational and ready for use. Around the base are 6 charging connections. There's iPhone 4, iPhone 5, female USB, micro USB, regular USB, a whole assortment of connections for any of your devices, including cameras, laptops, and what have you. And folks use them for all different kinds of charging purposes. So here's a couple pictures snapped by folks who were using Street Charge, and these were posted on Twitter and Instagram. One of the interesting phenomenons of Street Charge this summer was the public reception to these devices. And this is really what caught us by surprise. You get a really close-up look at folks using them and what it looks like to have your phone charged and plugged in. They were a phenomenon. And folks on the street started taking their pictures with them and posting them on Flickr and Instagram. Now, for AT&T, we're a phone company, a mobile phone company in New York. This is not typically how people talk about their phone company. So AT&T enjoyed this incredible burst of social media attention that spanned the globe. And we launched this project on June 17th, what we thought was going to be part of our New York City community engagement program, part of what we do across the country. AT&T is a major corporate giver supporting philanthropic programs, marketing sponsorship events, foundation giving to fight the dropout crisis in our country. And in New York City, we do some interesting things because New York City is home to the investor relations community, the analysts, as well as global media. So what we do in New York is a little bit like what we do in LA and San Francisco and in Washington, D.C., where there's a lot of thought leaders and people who influence the conversation coast to coast. And so we have a little bit of latitude to have some fun. And so this was a real fun project. And what we enjoyed was this social media. And that's because I don't know if you can quite see it, but on these wooden panels, the only branding on Street Charge is the globe and the hashtag AT&T Street Charge, which is literally branded into the wood. It was burnt into the wood. So why Street Charge? In New York City, using your phone all throughout your day is an experience that's a little bit unique from the rest of the country. In New York, people don't have the opportunity to top off on their car ride to work, or their car ride to their meeting, or their car ride back home. That's an experience that's not typically enjoyed by a lot of New Yorkers. People have their phones in their pockets. Probably a lot of people here are thirsting for a charge, and I wish I had this unit right here for you. But I don't. It doesn't work inside. Well, it does work inside, but there's no sun. It would run out. So the unique situation that New Yorkers, our customers, and mobile phone users face is running out of a charge in the course of your day. So hence Street Charge. And so because it was solar powered, it didn't require any infrastructure hookup. There's no electrical hookup. It just sits there on its own in a park or on a boardwalk. And Parks Department loved that because we don't have to dig anything up. We've just got to put it there. Because of the design, it was minimalist, it was sleek, neighbors welcomed it, it had a very positive reception in neighborhoods. And of course, the premise here is that you can't use our network or your network if you're not an AT&T customer without power on your phone. It's very simple. So where did it come from? So rewind a year ago. 1 year ago, Sandy hit New York City, and everybody knows the story. New York, because of the population density, and because also the prevalence of underground utilities, created a natural disaster on a scale that companies like AT&T haven't really encountered in a lot of other places. And so for AT&T, responding to disasters is just a part of our business. Tornadoes, blizzards, wildfires, you name it, AT&T has an enormous infrastructure to deploy coast to coast to respond to these disasters. But in New York, where electricity was knocked out, as well as the old copper wire lines were completely knocked out, the problem here was acute, and it was getting cold. So the story is this. Our chairman, Randall Stephenson, flew up from Dallas, Texas. Our state president, Marissa Shorenstein, got him in a meeting with Mayor Bloomberg, face-to-face, within an hour after his plane landed. And Randall asked the mayor, what can we do to help? And the mayor said, what you can do is provide cell service at our distribution centers, no problem. They're all over, mostly coastal New York City, so like the Rockaways, Coney Island, Midland Beach on Staten Island, and of course we know what happened down the Jersey Shore. We had the same response on the Jersey Shore. But also use our diesel generators to power the entire operation. So not just our cell towers, but to power the lights, the refrigeration, all the utilities. And because we're a phone company, what we did was we literally daisy-chained surge strips one after another out of the generators, and folks use those to plug in their phones. Because if you don't have a charge, you can't use the network. And so what we saw was this enormous crowd of folks around our distribution centers, and we have dozens and dozens of pictures of this, and we actually got a good amount of media attention for it, of people coming to the AT&T charging stations to use our service, but also to get a charge, because power was out for weeks, and so we were there for weeks. And that's how Street Charge was born, right? So we put this together and said, look, in better times, when we're not facing a crisis, New Yorkers still face this daily challenge of keeping and holding a charge on their phone. And they need that to communicate with their parents, who they may be taking care of at home, or their babysitter, or to communicate with a spouse, or whomever. Just to keep your life moving, New Yorkers are some of the most connected people in the world. And we know that without a charge, you can't do that. And so Street Charge was born out of this simple lesson from Hurricane Sandy, and we brought this all throughout the city, 22 stops from the Bronx to Staten Island, Midland Beach, Brighton Beach, you name it. Wherever there was a crowd of people, you would see a Street Charge, and a lot of folks would be around it collecting the sun to power their phones. And then this social media phenomenon was born, AT&T Street Charge, and you should check it out on Twitter. It's really kind of interesting. And these are all photos that I grabbed from Flickr and Instagram. It's really pretty cool. Folks like this don't usually talk positively about phone companies, so we were very pleased with that. So that's the basic idea with Street Charge. And the lesson that we took to heart with Street Charge is that corporate responsibility for AT&T isn't just about giving, and we do a lot of giving. Here in the 5 boroughs and across the Northeast and the nation, we give a tremendous amount of money to fight dropout, to fund all sorts of sustainability and citizenship programs, helping our seniors return home, or our soldiers return home, and programs for seniors to adapt to this new wireless world. We're very committed to our communities. We have lots of customers. But the lesson was to not just to give, but to listen to the local community and learn from their experiences and to respond in a way that suits their needs. And that's what we did here in New York, and we were rewarded generously by the city and all the publicity that we received around the world when we launched this program, particularly in the few days after it launched. And for AT&T, that was a really big break, and we were really proud of the project here. It was a pilot program in partnership with the city. We are looking for ways to expand it next year. We will be back all over the 5 boroughs this year. And I know just talking with colleagues coast to coast that there's an interest in doing this in other markets as well, because it's so obvious where you've got people with phones, you need electricity to keep those phones powered. So that's it. That's my presentation. Thank you.
Return on investment of sustainability reporting. I know it doesn't sound quite as sexy as a 12-foot steel pole, but it is actually pretty exciting stuff. And I guarantee that most S&P 500 companies like Mosaic are doing sustainability reporting, and companies, it's a cost. It's not just a cost for expensive people like me, it's also a cost for all the people that you're individually asking to get the data from to form these reports. So it's important to actually sit back and analyse what is the return on investment of doing all this effort and this sustainability reporting, and promote that throughout the company so people actually understand why we're doing this kind of stuff. I note, by the way, on that poll, if you ever come to Tampa, we're the lightning capital of the world, so you probably don't want to do a 12-foot steel pole in Tampa. Now, Carrie introduced Mosaic this morning, so I'll just make a couple quick points. Mosaic is a Fortune 500 company. It's the world's largest fertilizer company when it comes to potash and phosphate. We have major operations down in Florida where we mine a lot of phosphate, and up in Canada in the middle, Saskatchewan, where we mine a lot of potash. We also have operations all around the world, and at any given day, we're generally moving about 50,000 tonnes of fertilizer in one place or another. Okay, so this is a bit of the bear in the woods situation. If you don't gather the information and put it somewhere, then people aren't able to understand the kind of things you're doing. So Mosaic started doing sustainability reporting back in 2009, and very quickly we actually started to get some external recognition. And as you can see, there's some examples there, and in fact, the group here, CR100, we've managed to get into that index as well, which has been fantastic. This is really, really important stuff, and it imbues a real sense of community with staff to get this kind of recognition. But it's also really important for the communities that we live and work in. And it's actually pretty easy to calculate a hard return on investment. And this is important for an engineering group like Mosaic. Engineers like numbers, so we can actually calculate hard ROIs for all these examples I'm going to give you. So for example, in this area, Mosaic in Florida, we mine for phosphate, and that mining is what's called strip mining. The ore body is a very shallow, thin ore body, and we have to disturb quite a lot of land in order to get at that ore body. And therefore, we have to have the agreement of the communities surrounding us in order to get our permits. Otherwise, we simply can't mine. So there's a ROI in terms of hundreds of millions of dollars on one side of the equation for the permits. If we don't get the permits, that's a big minus. And this type of external recognition is the kind of thing that can help communities say, okay, maybe Mosaic is doing the right thing. Maybe they are actually a company that we want to have in our backyard. This was a really interesting one for me, and I know we've had some speakers talk about it today. It was actually a bit of an eye-opener to me, and I had a really good experience about 6 months ago now, where I was wandering up the stairwell in the office, and I got stopped by a new employee, and and she said to me, I joined Mosaic a couple months back, and I used to not think very highly of Mosaic, but I saw a sustainability presentation that you did, and I saw all the great stuff that Mosaic was doing, and I looked a little bit further and ended up wanting to join Mosaic. And so this was someone that went from a detractor all the way to being someone who's super positive about Mosaic, and this person actually works in our reclamation department now. That's an incredible change. In terms of doing the ROI here, we went down and we talked to recruiting, and they said now we're getting 20 to 25% of the folks, when we ask the question, why do you want to join Mosaic, their answer is because of what you're doing in sustainability, because we know you're going to be around for a long period, because of what you're doing in corporate social responsibility and governance. That's a fantastic stuff. So you can say, okay, 20% of the people we're recruiting, how many thousand people do we recruit in a year? You can multiply salary and you can again get a very large number. And you can compare that with the cost of doing sustainability reporting, which is still a large number, but it's a lot smaller. Confidence in sustainability data. This is actually a really super important one. And just to give you a hard example here. So a couple of weeks back, our major animal feed customer, the biggest one on the planet, contacted us, and they wanted to know about some of our sustainability data. They wanted to question some of our greenhouse gas data. So we, within the day, were able to get back to them with all the basis of calculation of all our data. We also, in fact, had certificates of external verification of the data and answered all their questions, and they were, thanks very much. That company is one of our very large customers, and so we have a number of how much they spend with Mosaic every year. Again, we can calculate very quickly and easily an ROI that is important and demonstratable to not just to C-suite people, but also all the way down to the company, that it's important that we are able to answer the questions to these customers, because they have a choice. They can go to company XYZ, and if we couldn't answer their questions, then there's a problem. And then the final one is investor confidence, and this should be obvious to everyone in the room here. So there's some investment groups that specifically have asked questions of Mosaic. So a couple of years back, there was a Norwegian pension fund that specifically asked Mosaic, why aren't you guys doing greenhouse gas targets? And we answered, well, actually we're working towards it, but it was good in a way. It put pressure on the company to actually say, okay, we've got an external pressure now, we've got to get on with this. There are other investment groups that invest in so-called green companies. And then finally, investors are really looking at, or one angle is the risk and risk management. So if a company like Mosaic uses a lot of water, and we do use a lot of water in our phosphate mining operations, investors want to see that the risk is managed. So they want to be able to go to the sustainability report and actually see that there is appropriate management of water when it comes to Mosaic and sustainability. 5-10 years ago, you would have had to go on to the annual report or possibly the 10K, and you would have had a little bit of information on there. Now in the sustainability report, it's clear to an investor that water is a material issue for us, and we take it very, very seriously. And you can calculate an ROI on that. You can say, okay, these hedge funds are X billions of dollars that's being invested. So again, we can actually create a number. So that's all I had. And just to reiterate, we think there's an excellent ROI on doing a sustainability report, and it's a message we're promoting throughout our company. Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Tom Cecich. He's the chair of the board of directors of the Center for Safety and Health Sustainability. Tom will prove that corporations can be influenced in adopting and enforcing standards, and that at all levels of their operations, and that can be found in sustainability reporting. So, Tom?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. The question is raised, if sustainability is gaining traction, is growing in importance and its visibility, then why are workers still dying? I'm sure I don't have to go into detail of many of the high-profile events that have occurred in recent years and have occupied front pages of newspapers around the world. In these events, dozens, hundreds, and in one case, 1,000 workers have died from industrial accidents. But as tragic as these are, we shouldn't forget that the International Labor Office estimates that as many as 6,000 workers globally die a day from work-related injuries, and that maybe 5 times that many succumb from work-related illnesses. Now, let me talk just for a second about perhaps the most visible, and that's the garment industry. And if we look at the 4 worst garment factory tragedies, and they've certainly occupied the front pages in recent months, we had Ali Enterprises, Pakistan, 262 people died. Tazreen, Bangladesh, 112 people died. Rana Plaza, over 1,000 people in the building collapse. So 3 of the 4 occurred in the last 13 months. I might ask the question, how many know where the 4th one occurred? And interestingly, 2 miles from where we sit, over 100 years ago. So this certainly asks the question, is the glass, from a worker health and safety standpoint, is the glass half empty or is it half full? I'd argue, you could argue half empty in that after a 100-year gap, in the last 13 months, there have been 3 major events in a time when sustainability seems to be gaining traction. So is this a bad trend in terms of globalization? Or is the glass half full that says the change that occurred after the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory really, due to galvanizing the public to these events, made major changes in the United States? Now, I should say that we shouldn't get too comfortable being in the U.S. or being U.S.-based and saying, well, gee, that's a terrible problem in these developing nations. Well, it is. But it doesn't mean we're immune in the developed countries and certainly in the U.S. I can refer to a March 30th, 2013 article that appeared in the New York Times talking about a factory in North Carolina, my adopted state, that faced the challenges of being in an impoverished area, being the main site in terms of people, jobs for that area. And what happened at this factory was they were using a solvent, heavily using, several hundred people work in this factory, using a solvent because of its potent greenhouse gas potential. They substituted, in the name of increasing their sustainability view from an environmental standpoint, substitute a solvent which turned out to be far more neurotoxic than the one they were using. And the article, the investigative report from the New York Times, presented the moral dilemma that faced the local doctor in a free clinic that started seeing neurotoxic effects from workers that worked at these facilities, and he was faced with the moral dilemma, placed in the moral dilemma. Did he aggressively go after the company that he suspected was creating this problem, or recognize that perhaps he could get them, these workers, so they wouldn't be exposed, but the threat would be the factory would shut down, 300-400 jobs would go away, and people would be cast into poverty, and poverty is a health issue also. And so these are issues in the United States. 14 people a day die in this developed nation. So the issue of sustainability and safety is not just in the developing world. Now, the group that I represent, the Center for Safety and Health Sustainability, we were formed 2 years ago by essentially member organizations that represent roughly 100,000 people like myself who have devoted our careers to working in improving working conditions in factories from a health and safety standpoint. We suspected that safety and health wasn't getting represented as well as it should in the sustainability conversation. And we did a study called Current Practices in Occupational Health and Safety Sustainability Reporting. What we did was we selected one of the organizations that rates the top 100 sustainable companies, and full disclosure, it wasn't corporate responsibility. We arbitrarily picked one. And we looked and we went down and examined all the public-facing information of these companies that were rated as among the top 100 sustainable in the world, and looked to see what they said about worker health and safety and their commitment to worker health or safety and their health and safety performance. And I've just summarized some of the findings, 4 bullets. Number 1 is very poor reporting, less than 10%, reported to the GRI occupational health and safety indicators. So of all the data that was reported, and it was all over the map with respect to health and safety, very few used GRI. So we took that as an indication that probably health and safety wasn't getting reported very well, and that perhaps the GRI indicators could be improved. And I'm really happy to say, Herman didn't mention it, but he talked about GRI versions 4.1, 4.2. The GRI board 2 weeks ago approved the formation of an occupational health and safety working group to look at the indicators. So we consider that a very big plus. Reporting for contractors, and our findings were low. Reporting on occupational diseases was non-existent. And perhaps most shocking finding was that these companies that were rated as among the most sustainable in the world reported, 5 reported greater than 10 fatalities, and one of the top 100 reported 49 fatalities. Now, our goal wasn't to demonize organizations. I certainly worked in the corporate world for 30 years, and I know that bad things can happen to good companies. But a company that, organizations that suffer multiple fatalities in the double-digit number, you really have to question, is health and safety, is worker health and safety really being a major consideration in rating sustainable organizations? So from this, we generated our big idea, and we think it's a big idea. It's not a new idea. And that's that we think worker health and safety is a key measure of an organizational sustainability commitment. That transparency saves lives. And we're pleased to say one of our recommendations was to revise the GRI indicators to be more representative, and that's been done. And then focus on occupational disease. It really does become a silent killer. So we offer those for as I said, perhaps not new ideas, but we think they're big ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. And finally, most of you know Richard Crespin, CEO of Crespin Enterprises, Senior Fellow, U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, Director of Business Outreach, U.S. Global Leadership Coalition, and formerly with CR Magazine, Commit, and the CROA. And now he has a big idea. Richard will show us how proven concepts like the Startup Weekend and the Business Model Canvas can quickly be prototypes of social innovations and forge public-private civil partnerships. Richard?
Sally, thank you. Hello. There you go, okay. I am Richard Crespin, and I do wear a lot of hats, but I'm going to talk to you about one of them in particular. This is the American honeybee, and the American honeybee is dying, and nobody knows why. Well, actually, that's not true. Lots of people know lots of reasons why, and that's the problem. That's the problem with problems. That's the problem with problems in the commons. No one problem, no one solution, and no one answer, or no one owner for any of those problems or solutions. This is the American honeybee keeper. He puts his bees to work in commercial pollination. 70% of the economic value of bees in America comes not from honey, but from pollination. 1 in 3 bites of food that you put in your mouth depends in one way or the other on the honeybee. But he doesn't own honeybee pollination. He owns his bees, but he doesn't own the land or the plants or the vegetables, the crops and the flowers on the land where his bees go to forage for food. This is the American farmer. She owns the land with the plants and the flowers and the vegetables and the crops, but she doesn't own honeybee pollination either. She doesn't own any of the upstream means of production, the seeds, the way the seeds are produced, the soil treatments are manufactured, the manures are produced, the equipment is manufactured that makes her modern farm run, nor does she own any of the downstream retailing, distribution, or packaging that takes her plants and flowers and crops and vegetables to market. This is the story of specialization, and by and large, it's a tremendously successful story. In a modern society, the primary method by which we create greater productivity is through specialization. And American agriculture is an amazing story of sustainability and of productivity. We produce more food on less land, with less waste, with less water, with less energy, and even with less pesticides than anywhere else on the planet and at any other time in history. But with all of that specialization can come gaps. Anytime our strengths become overextended, they become our weaknesses. And in between all of those different specialists have opened up gaps. And into one of those gaps has fallen the little honeybee. And when you're faced with a problem where there is no one clear cause, where it's a multifactorial problem, oftentimes the discussion devolves into finger pointing. It's not my bee husbandry practices, it's your planting practices. It's not my planting practices, it's your pesticides. It's not my pesticides, it's your agricultural policies. It's not my agricultural policies, it's the worldwide demand for for food. And when you face these problems, and even if you can push past all of the finger pointing, at the end you're faced with a right versus right decision. Not right versus wrong, but right versus right. It is an intrinsically good idea to increase food production for an ever hungrier planet, and it is an intrinsically good idea to preserve the health of the honeybee, but what do you do when the two are in tension? And because by definition problems in the commons are on a slow burn, where no one party or organization or sector stands to lose or gain in the short term, but where we all stand to lose or gain in the long term, how do you weigh off those different costs, particularly when most often you're asking somebody to take a very short-term pain in order to achieve a very long-term and vague benefit that probably doesn't come to them, but comes to their neighbor. Most often, we've resolved problems in the commons by recourse in law or regulation. And the public finances the difference between the short-term pain and the long-term gain. But in an increasingly polarized world and an increasingly gridlocked government, not only can we not rely on law or regulation to solve these problems, it may in fact be unnecessary. All that may be necessary is a different kind of conversation, a conversation that brings together parties across different specialties, asks them to look at the problems differently, and to move quickly from thought into action. So how do you do that? Well, we've been studying for a while now a number of different innovations that have helped to do exactly that in other parts of our economy. And the two that we've picked out are the Startup Weekend and the Business Model Canvas. A Startup Weekend brings together budding entrepreneurs and sends them through a series of exercises such that they come in on a Friday and they leave on a Sunday with an essentially complete business plan on one page, often documented in a business model canvas. And they go out into the world with a minimum viable product that they test and experiment and have the market give them feedback. They get out of their own heads and they get out into the market. And we've taken these concepts and we've adapted them for tackling problems in the commons. We haven't been able to get it down to one intensive weekend, but we have been able to get it down to two. The first one is what we call a mashup summit. And in a mashup summit, we bring together all of the different parties who have a vested interest in solving the problem, and we don't talk about laying blame. We don't talk about trying to solve the problem. We simply look at the data. We inundate them with science, and we try to get everybody up to the same level. And if we've done our job right, we bring new people in to have a different kind of conversation. Because what we found is that innovation very rarely comes from people who are already steeped in a field talking to other people who are steeped in that field. Real innovation comes at the intersection of multiple disciplines or when you give permission for new actors to enter the field. And we send these people out and back to their organizations, and we ask them to go back and talk to their organizations about what kinds of commitments they could make, what kind of assets and infrastructure and resources and money they could bring to the table to solve what we will hopefully have distilled down to a handful of potential causes. But more importantly, we ask them to go back and think about what kinds of different conversation could we have next that would be so different than any conversation they've ever had about that problem in the past that they would be willing to expend their personal social capital to recruit others to participate in the conversation. Then we bring them back in for a PartnerUp summit where we try to facilitate the creation of strange bedfellow coalitions, putting together people who don't normally talk to one another, walking them through a modified version of the business model canvas that we call the partner model canvas, and have them go through that structure and go out into the world to experiment with market-based solutions and commercial innovations, not philanthropy for philanthropy's sake or collaboration for collaboration's sake, but the creation of real, lasting, and sustainable solutions to social problems. This is the Honeybee Health Summit, which was hosted by Monsanto along with Project APISM and the Honeybee Health Advisory Committee to bring together over 100 of the most vested people in improving honeybee health. We brought them all together, researchers, academics, scientists, regulators, big ag, little ag, the honeybee trade associations, the major honeybee keepers, the growers, and we inundated them with science. We didn't talk about blame, we simply looked at the data. And as a result of this 3-day summit, we sent them off into the world with 5 principal causes to examine that were helping to inhibit honeybee health. We've sent them back to their organizations, and we've asked them to come back to us in the coming months to think about what kinds of strange bedfellow coalitions we can form. We'll be bringing them back in for another round of PartnerUp summits, and in the interim, several of the organizations have already stepped forward to voluntarily create a honeybee health consortium that will help to provide lasting infrastructure and ongoing research and development to improve honeybee health. So how do you do this? How do you actually form these partnerships? Well, we've modified the business model canvas to create a partner model canvas. And what we found is that it's not simply enough to have people document the different parts of a partnership. You need to have them go through a series of conversations, very practical conversations, so that everybody comes away with a similar understanding of what they're going to be asked to do and how they're going to work together. We start off by looking at what is the problem we're trying to solve. For whom are we trying to solve that problem? What target population? How are we going to produce unique results through this partnership to affect that target population? How can we deliver that value through specific touch points? How can we have a unique relationship with our target population as we deliver those results? What kinds of relationships do we need to have with our supporters and funders as we deliver our new value proposition? And what kinds of funding streams can we produce that would allow the partnership to be sustainable? Then we look at which are the major players that we need to make sure are in the partnership. What resources, assets, and infrastructure do they bring to the table? How are we going to deploy those resources, assets, and infrastructure in solving the problem? And how are we all going to work together? And what costs are we going to incur in the process? And we walk out of this situation with a single piece of paper that allows people to see not how they're going to create a public-private partnership, but rather how they're going to solve social problems with market-based solutions or create commercial innovations in solving social problems. This isn't simply a tool for improving honeybee health, and nor is it a tool that we want to keep to ourselves. It's a tool that we want to give to all of you. And if you tweet me or you email me, I'm happy to share the Partner Model Canvas with you. Because we want to put it into the hands of people like you, leaders like you all over the world, so that you can accelerate your ability to tackle these kinds of problems in the commons. Not simply for the common good, but to create the goods and services that will allow our markets and our economy to continue to flourish and prosper. Because in a world of increasing specialization, we know that these gaps are going to continue to open up. And while the honeybee is the one who's fallen through this particular gap, I can't predict where the next gap will occur or where the next problem in the commons will pop up. But I can assure you that it will come. And it's going to come with increasing frequency and increasing intensity. And in a world of gridlock politics, we can't rely on government to solve these problems for us any longer. It relies on leaders like you to take on these problems in the commons. Thank you.